Before I tell you about the funeral, I need to take you back further. Back to the day my life actually broke, not the day my father died, but the day I found out what my own sister was capable of. My name is Claire Whitfield. 6 years ago, I was standing in a small dressing room behind a chapel in Millbrook, Ohio, in a wedding dress my mother had altered herself, listening to 200 guests settle into their seats. I was 26 years old. I was the happiest I had ever been. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that my sister, Vanessa, had spent the previous 11 months making herself indispensable to my fiancé, Nathaniel Cross, in ways that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with strategy. Vanessa was never a woman who acted in the moment. She was a planner. While I was choosing flowers and dress fittings, she was showing up at Nathaniel's office with lunch for the family, asking about his father's struggling industrial company, offering advice, offering connections. Her own social circle was old Columbus money, the kind of families who sat on bank boards and country club committees. She let him see, slowly and patiently, that a life with her came with doors that a life with me simply didn't open. She never said a cruel word about me. That wasn't her method. Instead, she planted doubt like a gardener plants something slow growing. A comment here about how practical I was, how unambitious, a story there about a fight she'd apparently overheard between me and a friend, twisted just enough to make me sound difficult. She made herself the mirror that reflected back exactly what Nathaniel was afraid of: a smaller life, a smaller name, a company that might never recover. And Nathaniel, for all his charm, was a man whose deepest fear was being ordinary. Vanessa understood that better than I ever did. She didn't fall in love with him. She recognized an opportunity, and she built a bridge to it. One lunch, one favor, one whispered doubt at a time. That afternoon, in my wedding dress, I heard the door of the dressing room open. It wasn't my bridesmaid. It was my mother, pale, her hands shaking. "Claire," she said, "Nathaniel wants to talk to you." Before the ceremony, I remember walking down that hallway feeling the silk of the dress against my ankles, feeling, for one last innocent moment, like the luckiest woman in Ohio. Nathaniel was standing near the side entrance in his tuxedo, and he wouldn't look at me. "Claire," he said, "I'm sorry. I can't marry you." I laughed. I actually laughed, because it felt like the kind of thing a person says as a joke seconds before they say "just kidding" and pulls you into a hug. He didn't say "just kidding. I've fallen in love with someone else," he said. "I didn't plan for this to happen. I need you to know that." That's when Vanessa stepped out from behind the chapel doorway, already in a dress that was somehow too well chosen for a guest, and reached for his hand. I stood in that hallway in my wedding dress, in front of 200 people who could hear every word through the thin chapel doors, and I watched my sister take my fiancé's hand like she was simply collecting something that had always eventually been going to be hers. My father was the only one who moved. He walked straight through that hallway, took off his own jacket, put it around my shoulders over the wedding dress, and walked me out the side door into the parking lot without saying a single word to either of them. "You don't owe anyone your dignity," he told me later that night, sitting on my childhood bed while I cried into a pillow. "Not even blood, especially not blood that treats you like something to be taken." I didn't understand yet how much that sentence would end up shaping the rest of my life. 6 years later, it was raining the day we buried my father. I stood at the graveside in a black coat that used to fit better, watching 6 men lower his casket into the ground, when I heard a limo door. Nathaniel Cross stepped out first, in a tailored charcoal suit. Behind him, Vanessa, his wife now 3 years married, held his hand the same way she had in that chapel hallway. Like ownership, like something she'd already won so long ago. She'd forgotten there was ever a fight. "Claire," Nathaniel said, "you look well." I didn't answer. I looked at my sister's face, at the practiced sadness she wore like the rest of her wardrobe, and I thought about every night I had spent rebuilding myself from nothing while she wore the life she had engineered out of my ruins. What neither of them knew was that I hadn't spent 6 years falling apart. I had spent them building the exact tools I would need to take it all back. I left Millbrook 2 weeks after the wedding. That never happened. For $1,000, a business degree I'd never used, and an anger that needed somewhere productive to go. I took a job as an assistant at a private equity firm in Chicago. I answered phones. I stayed 3 hours after everyone left, teaching myself acquisitions, restructuring, leverage, not because I loved the work at first, but because understanding something completely was the only thing that made the world feel less chaotic than the day Nathaniel let go of my hand. 3 years in, I found something in a filing everyone else had missed: an undervalued manufacturing company sitting on patents nobody in the boardroom understood. I pitched the deal myself. My managing partner laughed, then read my numbers twice, then didn't laugh anymore. We sold those patents 18 months later for 11 times what we paid. My name was on the memo.by 29. I had my own fund, Whitfield Capital Partners, 14 employees, a growing reputation for finding value other people overlooked in struggling Midwest companies, and one of the companies my analysts flagged 8 months before my father's funeral was Cross Industrial Solutions, Nathaniel's company, his father's legacy, which Nathaniel had spent 3 years running into the ground with bad debt and vanity expansions that looked good in press releases and terrible on a balance sheet. I didn't go looking for revenge. I went looking for a good deal that happened to have his name attached to it. But once I understood exactly how close he was to losing everything his identity was built on, I stopped pretending it was only business. I want to be honest about something the polished version of the story usually leaves out. I almost didn't get to buy that company at all. My own investment committee pushed back hard. Emotional entanglement, one partner called it. Once he found out the target company's CEO was my ex-fiancé. You have a conflict of interest, Claire. If this goes wrong, it goes wrong publicly, with your name on it. I had to fight for that deal inside my own firm before I ever sat across from Nathaniel. I spent 2 weeks building a case so airtight that even my most skeptical partner couldn't find a hole in it, proving the acquisition made sense with or without the history, walking the committee through the patents, the restructuring plan, the jobs we'd save. I got approval by a single vote. Then came the second fight. Nathaniel, once he realized who was really behind the offer, spent 5 of his 6 remaining weeks trying to find another buyer, anyone who wasn't me. He flew to New York twice. He courted a competitor of mine, a firm called Ashgrove Partners, who smelled blood in the water and tried to swoop in with a lowball bridge loan designed to buy him just enough time to keep control. For 4 days, I thought I'd lost the deal. Then Ashgrove's due diligence team found the same defaulted loans my team had already flagged, and they walked away rather than take on the risk. Without owning the whole company outright, something Nathaniel refused to give up. His pride cost him his last real lifeline. By week 6, the banks moved in. I bought the company from the receivers for less than my original offer, with every patent, every contract, every asset intact. One of my regional managers told me months later that Nathaniel had driven out to the old plant one last time, the same building his father had put his own name on 40 years earlier. He'd stood in the parking lot for almost 20 minutes, just looking up at the sign, before the new one went up: Cross Industrial Solutions, coming down; Whitfield Industrial, going up in its place. He didn't get out of his car again after that. He just sat there until it got dark, and then he drove away. I hadn't destroyed Nathaniel Cross. I had simply been the only person patient enough and skilled enough to still be standing in the room when his choices finally caught up with him. He asked to see me once, after the papers were signed. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to look him in the eye one last time and see if there was anything left of the man who used to make me laugh over gas station coffee at 22. There wasn't much. You did all this just to get revenge on me? He asked, sitting across from me in the same glass conference room where I'd first watched his confidence disappear. No, I said. Revenge would have been watching you fall and doing nothing. I offered you a way to stand full restructuring. Your job, your father's name still on the building. You were too proud to take it from me. You wanted me to fail. I wanted a fair deal, I said. You wanted to still be the man who left me at the altar and got away with it. Those 2 things were never going to survive in the same room, Nathaniel. That part isn't on me. That part was always on you. He didn't have an answer for that. 6 years earlier, he'd looked at me in a hallway and said he was sorry he couldn't marry me. This time, He just looked at the table, and I understood that some men only ever learn what they've lost after it's the only thing left to look at. Vanessa came to my office 3 weeks later. I almost had my assistant turn her away, but some part of me, the part that still remembered being 9 years old and sharing a bedroom with her, let her in. She didn't sit down. "You took everything from me," she said. "The house, the company, my marriage. He's not even the same person anymore." "No, Vanessa," I said. "I took nothing that was ever really yours. You took a man out of a hallway on my wedding day and built 6 years of a life on top of what you stole. I just stopped carrying the weight of what you broke. That's not the same thing as taking." "Dad forgave me," she said, her voice cracking, "before he died." "I know," I said. "He told me too. He said forgiving you was something he needed for his own peace, and that I didn't owe you the same thing. He told me the difference between forgiveness and forgetting is that one sets you free, and the other just lets the same person hurt you twice." She stood there for a long moment. In an office she never could have imagined me building, in a life she never planned for me to have. And then something shifted in her face, the practiced composure she'd worn her entire adult life finally cracking. "You were supposed to be the one who fell apart," she said, and her voice wasn't steady anymore. "That was supposed to be you, not me. I don't even recognize my own life right now, Claire. And you're standing there in a corner office looking like none of it ever touched you." "It touched me," I said. "It touched me for 6 years. I just didn't let it live in me forever the way you let winning live in you." She sat down then, without being asked, and put her face in her hands. And for a moment she wasn't my sister the schemer, or my sister the thief. She was just someone realizing, all at once, that the life she'd built on someone else's foundation had never been able to hold weight on its own. I didn't move to comfort her. I wanted to. That's the part nobody tells you about revenge. Some old, stubborn piece of you still reaches for the person you used to love, even after everything. "I think you should go," I said, quietly, without cruelty. "Not because I hate you, because I finally don't need to prove anything to you anymore." She left without another word, wiping her face in the elevator where she probably thought no one could see her. She never called again. Today, Whitfield Capital Partners manages just under $300 million across 11 companies, including the one that once belonged to a man who thought loyalty was optional and love was something you could simply take out of someone else's hands. I renamed it Whitfield Industrial. There's a small brass plate by the entrance with my father's name on it. Robert Whitfield, the man who put his jacket around my shoulders in a parking lot and told me dignity wasn't something anyone else got to take from me. I didn't spend the rest of my life waiting for another man to prove that I was worth choosing. That was never the point of any of it. Not the company, not the confrontation, not even my father's name on that building. Somewhere in those 6 years I stopped measuring my life by who chose me and started measuring it by what I chose for myself. People sometimes ask if I regret how it ended. I always give them the same answer. I didn't destroy anyone. I built something so entirely mine that when they came looking for the woman they'd left behind in that hallway, there was nothing left to find. Just a name on a building, and a woman who finally kept her father's memory instead of her sister's forgiveness.